Well, there's nothing wrong with Markdown that can't be expressed in 2 spaces.
That's not wrong.
No.
Okay, it is 12:30 on the dot, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I am Karen O'Donoghue from the Edu team, and we do tutorials currently on Sundays and at other times during the week. First of all, there will be a survey at the end of this. We are really seriously interested in your feedback, so please take the survey. We're interested also in additional topics and volunteers for those topics. And we're also interested in additional people that would like to help with the Edu team. So if you are at all interested in this space, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that people suggest that we should do that we just don't have the resources to do. So I would love your help. And the Edu team mailing list is now an open mailing list, so you can actually just join it and start participating. And with that, the tutorial for this session, we have one on how to create an internet draft using XML or Markdown. And we have Matt Miller to talk about the XML to RFC stuff. And we have Dan York to talk about the Markdown. So thank you and have a good tutorial.
Thank you, Karen. I'm hoping everybody can hear me all right.
Is the audio working?
All right. So hello, everybody. As Karen said, I'm Matthew Miller, and I'm here to talk about how to create a internet draft using XML to RFC. So this tutorial overall, we're going to briefly highlight some of the various options that are available, but I'll be talking about XML to RFC, and Dan will then be talking about creating it with Markdown. And then, even though we'll have a dedicated area for questions at the end, feel free to, if you have something particular, feel free to let us know, and we'll try to explain. So, so the internet, the overall process for publishing your document here is you have your draft, whether it's working group or internet draft, and submit to the ISG, go through the community process, and get to the editor. That's how you get things done, but obviously, to get started, you need to know what it is that you're creating. And some of your options for how to do that here are, there's obviously XML to RFC that we'll be talking about today. And cram down, which Dan will be talking about, but there's also MMark. There's also a few other options, whether it's with Pandoc, NROF, or even a Word template. And I think I saw recently somebody has an Emacs mode to help out. But today we're talking about XML to RFC. What is it? Well, it's a tool that will generate your internet drafts, those NRCs, from an XML source file. And there's a couple of vocabularies. Some of you, if you've written them before, if we can get a sense, who's written an XML draft before? So, wow, many of us. All right, so the formal, most of you are probably familiar with the version 2. But there's now upcoming a version 3. That's RFC 7991 plus some updates that Henrik has been working on. So this will take that XML file and be able to convert it to text or to an HTML, PDF, even a fully expanded. And you can either use it today through the website or download it yourself through Python. Some good reasons to use this is it does create it in the right format with the right boilerplate. Helps you get the formatting for your entries and be able to include them in your cross references. Plus, you can give some outputs that are a little bit easier for us to read in whether it's HTML or PDF. And it also has some better support. This latest, the V3, has support for non-ASCII characters and SVG diagrams. So you can do all this with, obviously you can then pass this around, this file around for comments. You've got all your metadata in there, so you can extract it back out or find these things. And the RFC editor, it simplifies their life. So now the XML to RFC tool is what you will use once you've written up your text in whatever editor you like to be able to do that conversion. The V3 is up at this URL for the experimental version, or you can download it Again, if you're familiar with Python, you can pip install XML to RC. And running it with this dash v3 option then does all this v3 stuff we're about to talk about. There's a place you can file bugs, or whether it's the the track tools or an email, or you can reach out to Henrik here if you've got any particular questions. So the quick start side is you can use the tool online. There's a couple options we'll be talking about in a bit that help you get started. So you can use the tool online to get a source document. There's a number of citation libraries that will then help you, because I mean, I don't think any of us have written something. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure nobody here has written it completely from scratch with no references. And then you can use your favorite tool to do the editing and use the XML to RC in order to generate those outputs you can submit to the RC to the data tracker. Yes. What are the citation libraries? So we'll go into that in a while, but it's basically it's all the references you would normally put in an RFC for your other documents. It's a nice collection and easy way to use those. So right, so there's the command line to be able to generate a v3 from an existing v2, or you can use the web service. And that will give you the source XML you can use then with your editor of choice. So editing an existing one, there are a couple of options to get started. If you have an existing internet draft text format, you can use the ID to XML to do this conversion. Or there's a web service to do this, and that will take that format and give you an XML file you can start working from. It's better if you've got an existing XML file. The ID tool does the best it can, but every once in a while there's some hiccups, so you'll have to go back and maybe clean some things up, make sure some references get correct. There's the XML file. If you've got an XML file, you can do that conversion. If you got a Markdown, you can run cram down and update, and then you can do whatever updates you need to do. Fred. Yes.
Do you have a V3 DTD?
Do we have a V3?
XML mind, I want to be able to edit files directly in XML.
Henrik, is there I don't recall. There is one in the, is there an explicit DTD?
Converted from V2 to V3, I have a DTD. How do I actually create modify?
So the schema for V3.
Henrik, we've got remote start.
So the schema for V3 cannot be expressed as an DTD. It exists as a relax-ng schema, as RNC or RNG files. And it's embedded in the distribution of XML to RFC. I can send either or both of those to you separately. If it's a fairly up-to-date editor, it should be able to take in the schema in that form.
Well, so the easiest way for me to generate a V3 file is to create it in V2 and convert it, is what you're saying. And oh, by the way, if I wanted a graphic, I'll create it as a PNG and then convert that to SVG.
So I assume that the follow-up question is because you're not certain that your editor can handle a relax-ng schema. Is that right? Okay.
I'm looking for a way that I can use the tooling that I've got, not switch to a different editor, and oh, by the way, buy a $400 software package to create images, and so on and so on. How do I actually create graphs now?
Okay, so if your editor cannot take in the V3 schema, then going the way you mentioned, converting a V2 should work. For the illustrations. I haven't tested using PNGs, so I'm not going to say that it will work, but I would recommend that you find a way, and I've looked myself for tools to create SVGs, free tools, and there are a number of them, so you shouldn't have to buy anything new. But if you want to work with SVGs, you will have to get some tool to do so. You can't expect it to come out of nothing.
Tools like OpenOffice or LibreOffice can export their the drawings that you make as SVGs. Are these acceptable to the XML tools? I know we have to use a subset of the capabilities.
Right. So there is a slide on this, but generally, as long as you've kept them pretty simple and keep them black and white, then the conversion should work. So gradients are going to be a problem. If there's really advanced, like essentially embedded images, that'll be a problem. But if they are paths, boxes, it should generally convert correctly. Right. Yes.
Just a clarification question. So if I want to use SVG, I'm building my SVG picture, and then there is a tool that will maybe use all the fonts or do some processing on the picture, the original picture, before inserting into the draft.
Yeah, so the XML to RFC will take some steps to render it correctly as an ASCII. At least that's what I think I saw, and so that it'll be in the internet draft, and the HTML will come out with a rendered image. I don't recall. I admit I don't recall looking at it to see whether it was a PNG that it spat out or an SVG. All modern browsers can handle SVG natively.
The HTML will have my original SVG.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. All right. So some other options for creating this XML file is, again, we'll have Dan go over cram down, or there's mmark. So if you're willing to start from markdown, and there is a creation wizard. It does spit out the V2 format, so you'll need to go through the V2 to V3 conversion mentioned earlier to work with that. But so there are some tools to help you get started. So creating this internet draft, obviously, so as we said, we start with an existing file. You make your author element for yourself. Within your text, you'll wrap your paragraphs around a T or text element. Any artwork you would put in there, you would wrap with an artwork element, source code with a source code element, and citations with an XREF. And we'll go over here soon what some details on the citation references. So one of the new things with the V3 format is support for non-ASCII, for Unicode. So here's an example of rendering Chinwu with both his ASCII information and his in Chinese information. And so you could do this, you can put these characters with this XML format, and as long as you haven't done as long as you use the UTF-8 encoding for the XML document, you can put in the normal places you would have put your author name, organization information, your email address, postal address, and even reference titles and series information. You can put in that Unicode information. You can put in the Unicode characters, and all of those elements have an ASCII attribute to put in the ASCII text for rendering out for those that need the ASCII representation. The ASCII representation helps with searching. Not all of our tools are the greatest on searching across all of Unicode correctly, so that helps with that. It helps with rendering in some places where UTF-8 may not be universally available yet. The only other place is whenever you're putting the new system does allow you to put Unicode just about anywhere. The one requirement is using the U element that helps validate and be able to put in some additional information. such as you can put in your Unicode string and be able to tell it, I want to output the Unicode representation plus the Unicode code points that would be relevant for that. So for anybody that code point may, for whatever reason, not render, at least they still have the representation, a description of the representation. So the U element is brand new with v3 updates. So it's not in RFC 7991 itself, but it is in the updates that Henrik has been working on. So there's some details we can point you towards. So here's an updated author template. As you can see, there's the normal things we've been used to. Now surname, plus surname and full name, all are ASCII, but with these new ASCII attributes, we're able to put in the ASCII versions of whatever Unicode values you have put in. So as we said, there's support for SVG diagrams. Here's one generated probably from something like Plant UML that can spit out SVGs. And like I said, so you can use them. They need to be black and white images and a subset of this SVG tiny profile. They will be included in your HTML and PDF. And as I said, just all current browsers know how to render these. There's a couple ways. There's the X-include to actually put it into your internet draft source. In an ASCII art equivalent, you can add that, and one will be generated if it's not there, but you can include it if you think you can get that formatted better. RC 7996 has more tips on making use of SVGs within your drafts. So also that comes up is new text stylings. If you are familiar with semantic HTML, these should be pretty familiar. EM for italics, strong for bold, TT for your fixed width, and sub for super and subscript and superscripts. And here's an example of some renderings. Also new here is differentiated list type. So before you might have been used to putting in list and T elements in order to render out and having to do some fiddling with attributes. Now there's differentiation between ordered lists, unordered lists, and definition lists. So the ordered list, this is your normal with numbers or with letters. There's also some additional customization you can do via that type out attribute on the OL. UL for unordered lists. So this is your normal bulleted lists. If you put empty equals true, then instead of getting a bullet, you will get an indented line with that text. And then the definition lists. So often in your terms, if you got expanded definition terms, this is a good way to render. Here's the name of the term, and here's the description for it. And these elements, similar to as you would find in HTML, render out. Some of the other new elements we have are a source code. So instead of using artwork, there's now a source code element that has a number of types that it supports natively. And if on request, I'm sure Henrik can point us to any additions there may be if others come up. So block quote, this is good for indenting quotes from if you're quoting certain lines from other documents or other things. Good way to put them in. And an aside, again, incidental text like a warning, a call out, a note, gives you some more flexibility on putting these things together in your document. So now references. So this is where the citation libraries come in, and listed here are a number of the existing citation libraries. If you ever go looking at any one of these, you will find them. It's essentially a directory of XML files, and each of those XML files essentially includes that reference element you would have put in by hand. So these are very handy, especially the RC internet drafts. Actually, I believe all of these are essentially rendered for you as these drafts are updated. So there's not really a need to go back and keep continuously updating your references manually in your draft as long as you're using the citation libraries. So here's some examples of making use of these references. So this is where the XREF element comes in. and you can put a target. As you can see, the targets are pretty much what you would have used. They match what you will find in the citation libraries. So RFCs, RFC and the number. Internet drafts start with I-D and the name minus the draft and minus the version number at the end. And then IEEE's format. ZEPs also have a similar thing if you're doing anything with XMPP. With those reference tags, you can do some customization. So if you prefer to have numbered references instead of the named references, you can do that with the ref element and specify simrefs equals no instead of its default. If you'd rather have names instead of these, if you'd rather have more familiar names rather than RFC numbers or internet draft names, there's a way to put in a display reference element that then you can essentially create an alias from your existing included references and say this is now to this target instead of what was in the citation. So also here is there's now support for tables. If you are familiar with semantic HTML, the table format here is very similar. And it's a way for you to put a table in without having to resort to trying to get the ASCII artwork lined up just right. This also gives you better support in HTML and PDF outputs. And here's an example of an HTML output. So some do's and don'ts around this. So rather than hard coding your references, and the XREF can be used for references even to your own sections. So you can, instead of saying in section such and such of this document, you can put an XREF to there. You should also be using XREFs when pointing to other documents. Again, with the XML-RFC tool, the output will do all the right things, especially if you've ever need to reorganize your document, change the outline, possibly have to update some references. This will take care of those details for you. The other thing is, instead of using artwork, we shouldn't be, with V3, instead of using artwork for your lists or your tables, artwork should just be used for the actual diagrams you're trying to put into your document. Instead, you should be using the ordered list, unordered list, or definition lists, or the tables, table format instead. Now, with all of this, especially for source code and sometimes even with artwork, there's a need to do, this is an XML format, sometimes you need to be able to drop XML in, or you need to drop characters that are special to XML. C data, this is, if you've already been doing XML v2, you've probably run into this. C data is essentially an escape mechanism for XML. It will then let you put in anything between that angle bracket C data and the closing square bracket angle bracket. You can put anything in there other than that square bracket angle bracket. And that will be rendered as it is typed. So you will, instead of you getting some sort of weird error with an XREF, like in this example, you would see angle bracket XREF close angle. So now that you've got some idea of how to put these together, you can start putting your files to work. Share them around for comments with your co-authors or editors, or so especially if you use some other code reviewing tool or document reviewing tool, it can be handy to be able to point back to lines. You can upload your XML to the ID submission tool, and it will, if you submit just the XML, it should output the correct formats for the text, the HTML, the PDF. Once your draft is approved for publication, the RFC editor would really like your XML format. It helps them get started very quickly. And if you've been submitting it through the data tracker, they've already got it. And like I said, you can use these to render your internet draft to HTML, so it's maybe possibly more accessible to some people. There's a lot more functionality than we can cover in this tutorial. So you can always go out and try it. As I said, XML to RC you can do with pip install. Read more in 7991 and Levelwetz's document, Henrik's updates here. And then for SVGs, there's 7996. There's frequently asked questions. If something's not there, you can reach out to Henrik and he'll do his best to answer. And there's a quick intro. It goes over this plus some more details. If you have any questions or suggestions for this part, you can ask now. There's also the mailing list and the RFC editor, or you can either reach out on that email address or visit them at their desk this week. And as Karen said, there's a survey we'd really like you to be able to take.
Oh, John.
Go ahead, John.
Hi. I've been writing RFCs at least as long as Fred has, so I can't claim complete ignorance of this process. However, it seems to me from what you said that as we transition to version 3, if I'm someone who's got good editing tools which are DTD dependent, that if I create version 2 and then convert to version 3 as you suggested, that I don't get any of the version 3 features, including the ability, since I spend a lot of my time these days on internationalization, the ability to use non-ASCII characters, which the version 2 DTD rejects. So from what you said, I think I'm more or less out of luck unless I learn and install and use a completely new set of tools. Is that correct?
If you absolutely need use of the V3, then unfortunately that is the case right now. Although Henrik, he's going back and forth. Henrik's going to the mic.
Henrik Levkovitz. So I've been thinking, I don't know how hard it will be to produce a DTD for tools that can't read the newer RelaxNG schema. But it should be possible to add most of the new elements in DTD form. As I said, I don't know how much work it will be to try to convert the schema to something close that can be expressed as a DTD, but I will actually make a try at that, which should help both Fred and John current tools.
It would be a big help. It's also a big help for another reason, which is that insofar as the RFC editor is planning on making the XML form, whatever that means, the archival form, the continuing evolution of these new forms is potentially quite problematic, and things which can be expressed as DTDs are in that sense probably more archivally stable.
I'm Henrik again. I'm not an expert on schema languages. My understanding is that DTD is not used as much as RelaxNG these days, but anyway, I will make a try. One more thing. For the V3 features, you will need V3 language, but if you only want the V3 output, you're perfectly fine continuing in V2. So you don't feel forced into V3 until you actually want to use the V3 features.
Understood. One additional question. When talking about non-ASCII characters, the comment was made about handling UTF-8. The difficulty is that properly rendering non-ASCII characters, especially for complex scripts, requires a lot more than simply handling UTF-8. It requires script-specific and sometimes language-specific rendering tools. Has that been dealt with, or are we still pretending that if we can simply put UTF-8 up on the screen, that's sufficient?
Henrik again.
If the question makes no
It's
sense,
no
let's
part.
have an offline conversation. There's no time, no need to take up tutorial time.
Right. But shortly, what XML to RFC does today is to process everything as Unicode. So any conversion to UTF-8 happens when the result is output. And I probably can look at whether additional things are needed there, but I need more information if there are problems.
Yeah,
I need to have
your
them pointed
question
out.
implies that we should have an offline conversation. Thank you.
So really quickly, this is Joe from CDT. Be sure to check your tools, guys, and everybody. RelaxNG should be widely supported unless you wrote it yourself. So it may just be pointing to a different schema and playing around like that, at least for the document definition.
Now I will hand you to Dan.
Thanks, Matt. So I'm going to talk now about using Markdown to create drafts. Let me ask the first question. How many people have used Markdown to create a draft? Okay, how many people use Markdown for other stuff? All right, other people, okay. So basically the question is sort of why are we talking about Markdown? And the answer is because if you look at the text on the screen, that text there is probably easier for most people except for those in this room, okay, to be able to understand, all right? So that's what Markdown is. It's a lightweight formatting language. It's been around for a bit since John Gruber and Aaron Schwartz and co. created it first there. The goal is that it is a writing format. It's just a text file. You're just going in and writing stuff. You've seen it used. Many of you will have seen agendas for working groups that are written in Markdown here, et cetera. It looks something like this, you know, using the number sign, hashtag, octothorpe, whatever we want to call it, for headings, the text, you know, dashes or bullets, all of that. It's a very simple format like that. You could see how you could do a link. You put square brackets around the target text. You put parentheses around the URL. It's all, I mean, this is how Markdown is. You just write this in a text file using any kind of editor, anything like that, and then you work with it. In RFC 7764, which is about using Markdown and design guidelines, has this nice chart which sort of shows where Markdown fits in the formatting of things. There are many different flavors. There's long discussions around why John Gruber did not want Markdown standardized in different ways, and as a result, there's a lot of different flavors out there in different forms. We're going to talk specifically about one of them. You should know there is actually now an IANA registry for Markdown variants, which has a number of different registrations inside of there. RFC 7764 talks about guidance on Markdown, and it provides a good reading, a good background about what it is, what the tools are, what the pieces are in there. To talk about creating an internet draft, it's a two-step process. You write your draft in Markdown, and then you run it through some tool that generates XML, and then it actually goes through the XML to RFC tool that Matt was just up here talking about. So you're just basically doing the first part to go and create the draft or to create the XML file. You're using this as a way to get that XML file to use. Now, you don't actually have to edit that XML file. You can do everything in Markdown if your draft is, you know, relatively straightforward and not doing super complex things. But you do also, there are people I know who use Markdown as a way to generate the XML files, which they then go and edit further using an XML editor of some form. There are a couple of different Markdown tools that are out there. Two of the ones that I know a number of people using are the one I'm going to talk about today, Cramdown RFC, which is developed by Karsten Borman, who you'll see around here, and another one called MMark. And actually, I just will say, I just discovered before putting this up there that URL is slightly wrong. He has a different repo now for where he's doing his updated code, but MMark is out there as well. There are two different ways. They differ slightly in the way they provide the header info and other stuff like that, but they're both out there. So cram down is a very simple tool to use. If you've got Ruby on your system or something, or most operating systems these days often have it installed in some form, you can just type gem install cram down RFC 2629. You might have to have root access or use sudo or something like that to go and install it. But once you do that, then the process is really simple. You create a markdown file, just with whatever text editor you want to use, and you have it end with .md or .mkd, and then you run this one simple command, kdrfc, cram down RFC, kdrfc, and the markdown file name, and that's it. It generates an XML file for you, and it generates your text file for you. It has all of the appropriate formatting. You can submit directly from those files. You can submit them directly into the data tracker. And that's my tool chain. When I'm creating stuff now, is I just go and I write this file in Markdown, I do kdrfc, and then I just upload those files. You can find more at this URL that's shown for Karsten's repo on GitHub. He did let me know that if for some reason your system does not have UTF-8 support in it, it should these days, but if you're somehow using an older system or something, you may have unpredictable things if you put UTF-8 into your Markdown file. He just wanted me to warn people about that. You also can, if you want to just experiment with this, or if your system doesn't support Ruby or something like that, you can also just go and use the cram down converter that's on the tools experimental page. Basically, what you would just do is create your Markdown file. You can go to this experimental page, you can upload the file, and then it will spit out the XML file, which then you would have to run through XML to RFC. So a little bit easier, in my opinion, to use it locally, but it is also possible to use the online tool that's out there. So to work with it, it's based on a variant of Markdown called Cramdown, which was developed by Thomas Leitner. If you want to see all of the syntax, you can go to that URL, and it will show you, all of the various different things you can do inside of the file. You begin your file with these 3 dashes. And then the header uses YAML. So you would just go and put something like this at the beginning, your title, abbreviation, all those kinds of things. If you want to incorporate references, like as Matt was talking about earlier, the syntax is really simple. You just go inside the file and you say, for a normative reference, you would just put the curly brace, exclamation point, and then whatever it is you want to have for the normative reference, and then 2 closed curly braces to do it. Or to make an informative reference, you would put a question mark instead of that. If you're referencing drafts, you do the same thing. You remove the word draft from the name and you put capital I dash capital D dot whatever at the beginning. But you can just put those in there, and then the Cramdown, the KDRC tool, will automatically pull the references and put it into its local cache and just build all that for you. So you don't have to get into doing X includes or any other different pieces like that. You just put it in quite like that. There's a lot of references out there. There's a lot of pieces that you can go and find, examples that are around there. I have a tutorial repo that has some examples there. Martin Thompson also has a lengthy Git repo that has all sorts of tools for getting started, and he has a variety of different kinds of drafts and features that are there, and he works with both the Cramdown and the Nmark formats. So that was really all I was going to show, was talk about it's really that easy, and I could talk a little bit more. I can show a couple examples if people want, but Markdown's a new tool. There's a number of new different tool chains that are being created that let us go and create these drafts very simply. You can embed some XML, some HTML inside of the files if you want to do something more more advanced. And I think that's really it to tell you that there's 2 RFCs you can look at. One is about the repository, one's about the design guidelines. Karsten's got this repo up there with his tool. I have a repo which has this slide set and some of the other examples and examples that are out there. There is also a mailing list, RFC Markdown, which a number of us are on, and people are very receptive to talking to you about different tools and things that are there. And there's a survey, and that's it. So questions? All right.
Hi, Arnaud Tadei. So, yeah, I wish I had this presentation a month ago before I did my first ID on Markdown. My experience is that it's pretty easy, I must say. You have to make your experiments, but there's one thing that made me suffer a lot was to enter all the references. Because if you miss a single space in the reference when you have to indent everything, if you have one character wrong, the cram down RFC does not really tell you where exactly it is. Right? I could not find a way exactly where to find it. So I had 50 plus references. I can tell you it was very, very long to find exactly where it was. So anyway, so apart from that, yeah, I wish I had this presentation before because I learned a few things. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Yeah. Well, Karsten's here actually. If you want to, not in the room, I don't think. Nope. But he's been in the hackathon. If you want to point out that to him, he's very receptive to comments and feedback like this.
Okay, thank you.
I would also say too, one of the nice things with Markdown that I found is that it works really well when you're using a Git repository to collaborate with other people, because the insertions and the diffs, the ability to go and work with that is a whole lot easier than when you're working with XML and you wind up having to reflow stuff and things get in different pages and stuff on that line. So there's a comment there. Dimitri.
Oh yeah, hi, thanks. Just a quick question. You mentioned the alternative tool, and well, you said this is a preferred. Can you say why?
It's not preferred. It was a case of I just have a few minutes to talk here, and so I was just using KDRFC is a little bit easier in terms of just how you go and reference it. It's got this KDRFC command. It's very simple. MMark, you have to put a few more command line options on, but many of my earlier drafts were written using MMark. The differences are not that much. It's really just pick one.
Cool. And one more thing, I looked at IANA. Well, it's not a protocol registry. You mentioned there's an IANA Markdown registry, and what's the difference between all these things? Like, you know, because I know I do write Markdown sometimes. I know there's like a basic, and there's people try to make it better, right? So,
yep.
So yeah, embrace extend. So is that really important?
So let me back up a question. One thing would be too, if you, as far as the tools go, Cramdown's written in Ruby, available there, and MMark is written in Go. So there's partly a language choice if you want to look at it or if you want to do anything with that or run it in different forms. They also, the two diverge slightly in some of the syntax, like the references. Meek's code uses, I think, square brackets instead of angle braces, and so there's a couple little differences inside of there. But it's really a question of which one you want to use that are there. For those who want to install tools without doing all the install in your own system, Paul Jones has created a Docker image of Meek's set of tools, so that was another way to run that one easier. It's just, you can experiment with either one. As far as the registry, I was not directly involved with the creation of that or anything around that. My understanding was it's created primarily for other people and tools to be able to have some understanding of what the different variants are.
So it's not so, but it's good to know that if you use one tool chain and switch, your text file wouldn't work.
Correct, because it's Markdown, right? There's no standard. It's not standardized. You have to pick which variant you're going to use. Yeah, just like if you use GitHub flavored Markdown for something.
Yeah,
and
like
you try
even
to take
RFC Markdown flavors differ in syntax. And
correct.
That's awesome, right?
The basics, they all support, John Gruber's original basics, but then they go on from there to do other different pieces.
Yeah, cool, thanks.
No, Sebastian. No, we'll go.
Okay. So
Miguel and then Sebastian.
just a comment. I think, well, we had a comment, someone saying that you have to reference you have to put all the reference in the header, but I don't think that's necessary. So you just put the brackets and.
Right. In Markdown, you don't have to go and put all the references in there. You can just put literally, like in here, in this example that I've shown here, I'm not showing a reference on there. If you scroll down, just go down, like there in this line, to do introduction, more information can be found in blah. You can literally just reference the draft or the RFC right in the text. You do not have to have your list of references first. What? Okay, Mike Bishop was saying he believes that's a more recent addition.
Update your tools. Right.
So I have a question as well.
We also have.
Okay. Go ahead.
Nope. He dropped.
Sebastian, we just let you come into the queue, but then you disappeared. So if you want to come back, oh, maybe that's you.
That's him.
All right, we'll get Sebastian here. You're on.
And it dropped again. I think he's having some issues.
Okay, well, so go ahead.
Right, so I saw in the previous presentation that so there is a story moving from a version 2 to a version 3. So I saw a lot of new vocabulary added or changed. When we are in Cramdown, I guess all of this is taken care of, right? Already, or when you produce from Cramdown to XML?
So go ahead, Henrik, come on up. No, you're.
Yeah.
As far as I know, nobody has adapted any of the Markdown tools to work with version 3 yet. I'm sure that they will, but no. Let's see. There's someone who has done work, some experimentation with V3, and he also has a tool. So I'm going to send a query, but currently I don't know of a tool that does V3 from Markdown.
You have to ask two things to Carsten. One, yes, fix the space, and two, understand it. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, my understanding was I think they're looking at, but I don't know if they definitely had that support yet. Other questions, comments? Yep, somebody coming over here. And Sebastian, if you want to get back in the queue, we'd be glad to have your question.
This is Alice Russo. I'm part of the RFC Production Center. Thanks so much for these presentations. The point I wanted to make goes back to the first one when there were questions about SVG and how do you know your SVG is going to be accepted. There's been a tool created called SVG check, which is for this purpose, which will compare it against the SVG set that's been defined in RFC 7996. And SVG check is available right now from PyPy. So it's PyPy projects SVG check, but it will eventually be a web service. So you could upload your XML file and it would tell you if your SVG is okay for the subset of tiny SVG that's accepted, or an individual SVG file. And it also attempts to correct your SVG to make it match that profile. And the other thing I was going to say was regarding the previous question, if anyone has updated their Markdown tool to use the V3 vocabulary, I think MMark has started the work on that, and it's on his MMark page. Thanks.
Other questions or comments? Anything else? Nope, we'll give Sebastian another try.
Hey, does this work?
There we go.
It does.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
We even see you. Yay.
Oh, that's interesting. I can see you guys too. So, hey, great presentation. I'm starting to write RFCs, and I've been playing around with these tools by Martin Thompson and Cramdown. I was wondering if there's a good reference to all the options and keywords and values that there's a lot of things like including snippets, and I'm not sure where to find those. Is that mentioned in there?
So I guess there's two things. One, in the syntax of let me see where it is. So if you look at Carsten's repo has some information in there and may have, I don't know if he's got the exact list of features inside of there. The other piece is in Martin's thing. I put a URL down there for some of the features that are in there. That may be where he's got more of it. There's a couple of other different drafts that you can take a look at. And also, quite honestly, if you look at I think pretty much all of the drafts written in the Quick working group these days are all Markdown. So in Quick, if you look at those, like pretty much all of that, and I also believe the HTTP BIS working group is mostly all Markdown as well. So if you look at those, you could see examples from their actual code of how they've gone and done that. That's also a great example of maybe another thing we could do with adding on some more Markdown tutorial docs.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Sebastian?
No, thank you very much. I'll take a look at that, I guess. I've been looking at all these examples, especially from the Doe group.
Doe too, yeah. That'd be another one.
Is there any difference between the sorry, I'm not sure what to call it, but like you can submit for the standards track under an area, or you can submit an independent stream, I think. Is there any difference in the markdown for that? I'm seeing a lot of the examples from like the Quick and HTTP and Doe, and they're all submitted under working groups. Is there a difference in markdown format that I would not get from those examples?
No, I think the format would be the same. It would just be in the header what you put for, you know, the working group or the stream or whatever the piece would be. And if you want to do it, if you're looking at it for independent stream or something, fire one of us an email and we can help you find that if you need to, or put it on the RFC markdown list.
Right. I'll contact the list then. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, sure. Anything else? Yes, question here.
I'm Rahul Jadhav. So in general, I've been using Markdown for all the other purposes, not for the IDE editing. The problem that I faced in general was adding comments to the document. And there is no easy way of doing it. You have to use HTMLized XML format to add comments in the Markdown itself. So I'm wondering, there are two questions that I have. So in general, in XML, we use the comment style, which is but the same comment style has to be applied in Markdown as well in the for the ID edition.
So Markdown ultimately will take, I mean, it's a simplified format, but ultimately will take your XML or HTML and plop it in where it can. So you can, I haven't tried this recently, but I believe I've myself have a Markdown draft that I've put in comments using the XML comment brackets.
So can that be simplified? I mean, is it possible that it looks pretty weird? And the other question that I have is
that's fair. That's fair. Go ahead.
The other question that I have is, will those comments be? I mean, the cram down tool. I've not used that, so to say, but will that tool incorporate those comments in the XML as well, or will it just discard those comments? Well,
so I don't know. I think that's a third question for Karsten.
Right.
He was going to come actually, but he's probably over at the hackathon working on something there. So.
I'll check with him. Yeah.
I believe at one point it did. I don't know if it still does.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else? All right, well then Matt and I will be around for a few more minutes, and please do take the short survey. And again, please join either the RFC Markdown list or the XML list if you're interested in being involved with more of these tools. And like we said, Karsten Borman is the author of Cramdown. He's here. I don't know whether Meek's here, but I've seen Karsten around anyway, and he'd be glad to talk to you about tools. All right, thank you very much.
And Mike Bishop, I'll point out that I'm doing a tutorial specifically on the ID template in the next time slot, and it's downstairs.
Yes.
Yes. GitHub tools.
If you'd like to go there and see how the ID template works with GitHub and other pieces, please go follow Mike and see it down there. Thank you all.
Okay. So comments. That's one. I actually haven't put a comment in a Markdown.
The problem with this tutorial is that you will never be able to answer the question because you never know which version.